morning, everyone. This is Making the Case. I'm Laverne McGee, in for Yodit. It is week 2 of jury selection in the trial of the men accused of killing Ahmaud Arbery. The week is over, but the jury panel is certainly not set, and this process appears far from over. So here's what happened so far. Close to 50 prospective jurors have advanced to what will be an initial pool of 64. From that pool, then they'll choose a final 12 plus 4 alternates. But today, things appeared to grind to a halt, with the strike being the theme of today's sessions. BNC's Drake Clark is outside the courthouse in Brunswick, Georgia, to explain.
There's no question the jury selection process in this trial has been unusually slow. The prospective jurors are getting frustrated, the attorneys inside the courtroom are getting tired, and the judge is saying that he's trying to move the process along as fast as he can, but also saying this is not the kind of trial he can simply rush through. Everyone knew the murder trial for Greg and Travis McMichael and William Bryan would be challenging. The biggest challenge, selecting a fair and impartial jury. 1,000 people in Glenn County, Georgia, where the trial is being held, received a summons to appear for jury duty. Many of the potential jurors know the defendants on a first-name basis, and almost all of the potential jurors have heard the name Ahmaud Arbery and seen the cell phone video of him being shot and killed at the hands of the McMichaels.
We are trying to move through this efficiently, but again, we don't do things quickly just for the sake of getting through matters.
The judge estimated it would take 2 weeks for jury selection, but the selection process has been slow, frustrating potential jurors who have to sit and wait in a room for hours, and also for the attorneys. On at least 2 days so far, court did not adjourn until close to 9 o'clock at night.
Those are long days. That's 12 hours in court, and doing that day after day is pretty taxing.
The community is also anxious. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in February 2020. 3 months later, video of the shooting was posted on YouTube, provoking a media frenzy and causing emotions to run wild across Glenn County.
What happened was not right. It's not us, and we are better than that, as you said, and we're going to get better through this.
Ahmaud Arbery's parents haven't missed a day of court. Their pain has no name, and it will never go away. But getting 3 guilty verdicts will help heal their hearts and this community. Justice delayed, but not denied, they say.
God is going to let a guilty verdict roll down out the sky. Right.
It's time to finish this jury process. Stop delaying it. Stop dragging it. It's time to start the trial.
64 qualified potential jurors have to be chosen before the next phase of jury selection can begin. Once the court reaches that 64 number, then they will have to cut it down to 16, 12 jurors and 4 alternates. After that happens, opening arguments can begin. In Brunswick, Georgia, I'm Drake Clark for Making the Case.
We have a lot to discuss with our legal panel tonight. Joining me now from San Francisco is veteran prosecutor and BNC legal contributor Paul Henderson, and in Atlanta, criminal defense attorney and vice president of the Atlanta NAACP, Gerald Griggs. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us tonight. I am so lucky to have you two brilliant legal minds help me through this. So I want to set this up for everybody first. So we talked about the strike being the theme of the day. At least 9 of the 18 prospective jurors questioned were struck for cause, many because of their close, often personal relationships with Ahmaud Arbery, his family, or the defendants, or their families. So one juror, referring to his close connection to a member of the Arbery family, said, quote, "I would call him a friend." Another, also with a close connection to the Arbery family, said reaching a verdict might ruin one of his friendships. So this has been the theme of jury selection. What do you read into all these strikes as we get closer to that magic number of 64? Paul, I'm going to start with you first. We knew it was a small town, but wow.
Yeah, it's a little shocking probably for folks outside of that community to really recognize that growing up in a small town also means that in a case like this, in a controversy like this, with stakes like this, and keep in mind at the heart of this is the conversation about race, that a lot of things get exposed. And so it seems natural to understand as people are talking about what translates as bias is coming out in the conversation about who can sit on this jury. And so when you were talking earlier about folks being stricken for cause on either side and or by the judge, that's exactly what it speaks to. The people that say that they are biased or that they do have some familiarity that interferes with their ability to listen to and or decide the case. And it probably is not helping that process along, although it increases the truthfulness and honesty there, that the family is there in the courtroom as well, along with the defendants. And so almost everyone in this pool in the small town recognizes or knows the individuals that are in that courtroom and certainly knows about the case. But really, we should be having the conversation too, so that people know what they're watching about what the standards are for cause versus the standards for preemptory challenges, as these jurors are being winnowed down into the magical 64, which will take us to the next level of analysis to determine our 16 that will sit in deciding this case.
Gerald, what do you think?
I think this is normal in any high profile case in Georgia, especially one in a small town like Brunswick. I mean, there are 84,000 people in Glenn County, so you had a 1 in 84% chance that you knew somebody associated with this case. So I don't think this is not abnormal. You know, in major high profile cases, it usually takes a month to select a jury to get down to the magical number of 64 to get to the actual peremptory strikes. These strikes for cause are because people cannot be fair or unbiased or fair and impartial in coming to the case, and they have some type of relationship with one of the parties. So this is normal. I thought the judge was being a little bit over anxious and thinking he could get this done in 2 weeks. I was leaning for more a month. We're almost on schedule for about 3 weeks. They should have 64 by the end of next week.
Oh, okay. I like your prediction. We'll see if it comes true. Well, here's what else came up. If it wasn't a personal relationship that got potential jurors struck, it was likely a fixed opinion. So during group questions, 15 of those 18 jurors, they raised their hands to say they already had formed a negative opinion of one or more of the defendants. When it came to individual questioning, we heard statements like, quote, "I personally think that they are guilty no matter what." I'm referring to the video. "It's just so ingrained in my mind, I don't think I can put it aside." Gerald, back to you. We know some of those people were struck, but some of them could make it on the jury. So how is the defense going to deal with that?
I think that's a very difficult question for the defense. And I think it goes to thinking in the defendants. You have to listen to what's happening in jury selection, and you have to get a feel for what a jury is going to potentially be like in this case. It's going to be very difficult to prove their defense. And again, of course, you don't have to prove anything, but these jurors are already saying that they are leaning in one direction. That's why many of them were struck. But they're just voicing what others are actually feeling. You know, some people can be rehabilitated and say, yeah, based on what the judge said, I could be fair and unbiased, but they still had that preconceived notion. And then once they see the video, it's going to be very difficult. So I think this is something that the defense has to mitigate against, and it's going to be an uphill battle.
All right, so some of the potential jurors are being questioned for a half hour or more, only to be struck in the end. But I want to take a look at two people who did not get struck today. So juror 281 is a white woman. She is from another part of the state and moved to Brunswick after Arbery's death. In fact, she said that she had never heard of the case until she told people she was moving. Wow. When it comes to the news, she said, quote, "If somebody happens to share something on Facebook, I'll see the headline there. I don't actively seek out news." Juror 281 was sent back to the pool after just about 15 minutes. A similar story for juror number 282, also a white woman. She said, quote, "I wasn't here when it happened. I was on vacation. I was gone for like a month." She went on to say, quote, "I don't know if we will ever know what really happened. I think there's always two sides to everything," end quote. What might either side see in these jurors? Paul, I want you to talk about the prosecution.
Okay, so from the prosecution, that ambiguity makes me a little uncomfortable. And what I would read into those responses is that they are not aware and have not cared to investigate or look into this would be the trial of the century for that community. It just is, for so many reasons beyond just the tragedy that happened. And so I had a number of red flags that would have been raised by those comments. I wouldn't necessarily have struck them right away, but I would absolutely have more questions for them. Because if this is not something that they are familiar with, I do want to know, and I would have questions about what kind of social media, what kind of news they watch, how do they get their information, what their communities and surroundings look like to not know about this case at all. I'm not saying it's going to block them completely, but I have more questions. Because the thing that we have to remember here when we're talking about exercising strikes that are for cause is that individuals have to express something. They have to tell you something. So my job as a lawyer is to elicit responses that I can craft, shape, or argue about in order to get them to fall into that case, that category or not, or try to rehabilitate them if I need to keep them. And that bias that we keep talking about is only one of the three standards that you need in order to fall into a for cause rejection. There's a bias that could express someone not being suitable to decide a case. There's an inability to understand. And the third thing is an inability to communicate with the other jurors. And so all of those things you're trying to elicit at the same time. But obviously, in a case like this, we're really focused on the bias part. And it really is intrinsically connected to the conversation about race. That's why we're having the conversations as in depth as we are, and the process is taking as long as it's taking.
Very thorough, Paul. Okay, so Gerald, what about the defense?
These are the exact type of jurors that you need. To make sure you keep them in that lane where they're saying that they can be fair and impartial, because they would lean towards your argument, or they are susceptible to your argument. So I think that these are exactly the type of jurors that you would need. Somebody that's not heard about the case, somebody that's not sought out information about the case, somebody that lives in a bubble, that's stuck their head in the sand, to not have heard about this in that small town or even in this state. So I think they're the perfect type of jurors that the defense would seek out.
All right. Well, Paul and Gerald, you have both graciously agreed to stay with us. So coming up next, we're going to talk more about how the long days and this drawn-out process could be impacting some of these jurors. So stay tight, everyone. We'll be right back. This is Making the Case.